that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you, and a happy Mother's Day belated to all the mothers in the listening audience. So let's start with something that's almost as important as what's happening with the economy under the Trump presidency. And that is the fact that Donald Trump is killing judicial liberalism. This was something that was brought to light in November of 2017 by Stu Varney on Fox Business Network.
A growing economy, a huge stock market rally, ISIS beaten on the ground, Rocket Man confronted. These are all Trump successes. Add one more. Big changes in the judiciary. For conservatives, this may be the most far-reaching of all the president's initiatives. Justice Gorsuch is on the Supreme Court, but there's a lot more going on. Listen to this. In his first 9 months, this president, Mr. Trump, has named 58 judges to the federal bench, more than twice as many as President Obama in the same period. The Senate changed the rules to get them in, and there's maybe another 100 still to come next year. They are packing them in. Wait, there's a lot more. The Federalist Society is urging the president to create a minimum of 260 brand new judicial positions. Brand new. That is packing the courts. That would expand the number of federal judges by 1/3. All of them chosen by President Trump. That would be a monumental shift. The nominees the president has already selected are noticeably young. That means they stay on the bench for decades to come. Think about this. After years of drift to the left, that's my opinion, drift to the left, the courts are on the middle of they're in the middle of a reboot, with conservatives and the Constitution in the driver's seat. Chalk this up as a quiet but far-reaching Trump win.
And the only reason this is a quiet win is because the mainstream media is not reporting on it. I guarantee you, had the Democrats managed to steal enough Senate seats to change the majority in the Senate, you would have heard headline after headline and segment after segment talking about how the blue wave had blunted the Trump packing of the courts. And I find it interesting to talk about packing of the courts and referring that to Trump. The Federalist Society made a recommendation. I haven't heard the president talk about him wanting to expand anything. That brings me to a piece from September of last year from the Washington Post, no friend of the current president, to say the least. But even they are acknowledging what Donald Trump is doing with the federal bench.
A federal judge ruled in favor of the administration.
A federal judge has now blocked the third version of President Trump's travel ban.
With gridlock in Congress and President Trump in the White House, The power of the U.S. courts is becoming increasingly apparent and politicized. Republicans have a prime opportunity to leave their mark on the nation's courts.
It's always been that Republicans, for some reason, care more about the courts than Democrats do.
Supreme Court justices. That's all. That's all you have to think.
And Donald Trump really capitalized on that in this past election.
More than a quarter of Trump voters said the Supreme Court was the most important issue to them. With that momentum behind him, Trump entered the White House with 108 vacancies for federal judges with life terms. That's 1/8 of the nation's 870 federal judges, more than any president since Bill Clinton.
President Obama faced a Republican Senate in his last 2 years, and those Republicans really blocked his nominees. That left a lot of openings to be filled right away, almost historic level.
The Senate continues our work to confirm President Trump's well-qualified judicial nominees.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has made courts one of his priorities.
It's my top priority. So as soon as they come out of committee, if I have a choice between taking up a particular bill or taking up a circuit court judge, I take up a circuit court judge because I think it makes the longest lasting contribution to making this the kind of country it ought to be.
As older judges continue to retire, Trump has handed more vacancies. 18 months in, 145 vacancies waited to be filled. Trump had nominated 137 federal judges at that point. Only 43 of them were appointed by the Senate, but that's on par with past presidents. And by the end of Trump's term in 2020, more than half of all life-term judges will be eligible for retirement.
Over 99% of the cases are decided at the lower federal courts. And so it's really important to have judges at those levels who are going to be faithful to the law.
One relatively recent phenomenon is the role of outside groups in starting almost campaigns for these Supreme Court nominees and even for some of the lower court nominees.
Tell your senator, confirm Kavanaugh.
Put Kyle Duncan on the Fifth Circuit.
They are spending millions of dollars on both sides.
The truth comes out.
The number of groups engaged in fighting the Trump administration's court packing scheme has grown, hugely grown.
Our role, really, from my perspective, is from the outside to be able to defend some of those nominees and correct some of the misconceptions, the distortions of your record. And we've seen, as the politicization of the process has ramped up, that happening more and more.
The number of Trump's appeals court appointments in particular stands out. He's appointed far more judges to the circuit courts of appeals than any recent president at this point in their term.
Appeals courts are important because they cover multi-state regions, and so whatever those courts decide becomes precedent in that region. Like all federal judges, they serve for life. And the Trump administration has really looked for younger judges. A lot of the judges that they've put on the appeals courts will serve for decades.
The bulk of our current federal judges were appointed by President Obama, but some who were appointed by Gerald Ford and Lyndon B. Johnson are still on the bench. Politicizing judicial appointments doesn't start or end with Trump, but his appointees could chart the nation's course for generations to come.
And what progressives don't understand is that is one of the reasons the electorate selected Trump. We've already seen what happens when you have progressive and liberal judges on the federal bench. You get Roe v. Wade, you get God thrown out of schools, you get people being sued because they're trying to exercise their religion as part of their business in their daily life. And they're saying, no, because your religion doesn't go along with our particular worldview, you cannot do that. That was what Hobby Lobby was all about. The Obama administration was suing Catholic nuns over abortion clinics, but abortion practices or contraceptive practices. The American people don't want that. If you don't want to go along with the far left agenda in your personal life, they are saying then you shouldn't have to. The same would be true on the other side. Whatever the agenda is that the government is trying to push, if you don't want to follow it personally, I'm sorry, that's what individual liberty is all about, not having to follow that which is offensive to you. Which is why the name Jack Phillips will be stuck in the craw of progressives for decades. He is the baker out in Colorado who was sued for not creating a cake to celebrate a homosexual wedding. The state of Colorado came after him, and he came up to the Supreme Court, and the state of Colorado got pimp slapped 7-2. They came back again. This time they had a lawyer who was making the case that, well, you know, we have an anniversary for some type of coming out. I don't know if it was a sex change operation or something dealing with transgenderism. And Jack Phillips said, no, I don't do that type of stuff. And before it could get to the federal courts, they wised up and said, you know what? We see the way the courts are going. We're not going to win. We've already lost once. We're not going to win, particularly as more conservative judges end up in the courts. When I say that, what do I mean? The Washington Times published an article that came out back on the 9th of May, and the title was Trump Overhauls Crucial U.S. Appeals Courts at a Record Pace. It's a generational change. What are we talking about? This past week, more than 100 judicial confirmations for Trump. And most are on the district court level. Most of them, but not all. 39 circuit court judges appointed to date by the Trump administration. And that's comparing that to his predecessor, who had 18 confirmations. 39 to 18. The Second Circuit Court could have a GOP majority number of appointees this year. This summer, as a matter of fact. The Third Circuit Court has already gone 7-6 in favor of GOP appointees. Let me make sure you understand what's going on here. Before Donald Trump came into office, on these circuit courts, Democrat appointees held a 90-71 advantage. That's now changed. It is now a 90-3 GOP appointed advantage. And Donald Trump isn't appointing liberals. Donald Trump is not appointing people who are going to come up with the odd decision that protecting America by limiting the number of people who come in based on the fact that governments where they are looking to exit from to come into the United States have no way to verify them and to validate them. No, he's not appointing judges who are going to sit there and say, well, it's a religious thing. It wasn't a religious thing. It still isn't a religious thing. He's not appointing judges who think like that. He's not appointing judges who think a woman has a right to kill just because she wants to the baby in her womb. He's not appointing judges like that. Which is fine, because the majority of the people in America do not believe it's okay for a woman to kill a baby in her womb just because she finds the child inconvenient. That's not what they think. And I find it interesting that the gentleman in that piece was talking about how Republicans are always more interested in the courts. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. It was FDR who wanted to pack the courts. And we're talking about, well, Trump is trying to pack the courts. Trump hasn't announced that he wants more court seats. That was an outside organization. Trump is simply trying to say these are the seats that are available. I want to pack them, if you want to call it that. I want to put conservative rule of law judges on the court. Period. I'm not looking for you to create more seats to put them on. I'm saying the seats that are there, let's put these people in. That's not the same as court packing. Court packing is what we saw back during the Roosevelt administration, back in the 1930s and 1940s, mostly the 30s, when he had a scheme to expand the number of seats on the Supreme Court so he could put more liberal judges with them, those who were not going to be opposed to his New Deal, which created the situation whereby the United States was the only country on the face of the planet that experienced the Great Depression. There was a worldwide depression, but if the New Deal had worked, please explain to me why the United States was the last country to come out of the Depression. The Great Depression didn't hit anywhere. Germany came out of the Depression, reparations, depression, and everything else. They recovered enough to the point they could start a flipping war. Where was the United States? Still stuck with 14% unemployment. I digress. There is no move on the part of the Trump administration to pack the courts. But Democrats have revived that FDR notion that maybe we don't have enough seats on the Supreme Court, and that's not good for America. We need other people. Wow. And there's some pushback to that as well.
And it confirms another Trump Supreme Court nominee, then 1/3 of the Supreme Court will be Trump picks. And Democrats don't like the sound of that. So they are now trying to rekindle the supercharged emotions felt during the Kavanaugh confirmation, pitching a new court with 15 justices instead of 9.
What if there were 5 justices selected by Democrats, 5 justices selected by Republicans, and those 10 did pick 5 more justices independent of those who chose the first 10? I think that's an idea that we should explore.
Adding new seats would water down the influence of those on the court right now, so Republicans in Congress are trying to keep the court the way it's been since 1869 with a constitutional amendment introduced by Congressman Mark Green, who says that schemes to pack the court are dangerous to the founders' vision of an independent judiciary that serves as a check on both the executive and legislative branches of government. Changing the Constitution does require the support of 2/3 of the House and the Senate, plus 3/4 of the states, and this measure does not have the support of the president.
No, I wouldn't entertain that. The only reason is that they're doing that is they want to try and catch up. So if they can't catch up through the ballot box by winning an election, they want to try doing it in a different way. Now, we would have no interest in that whatsoever. It'll never happen. It won't happen. I guarantee you, it won't happen for 6 years.
Adding seats isn't the only change being pitched by Democrats running for president. Cory Booker is talking now about term limits.
Now, if all this is a good idea now, why wasn't it a good idea during the 2 terms of the Obama presidency? How come Democrat and they had the votes to at least get it to the point where it was going to be out among the people? They could have pushed it, particularly in 2000 from 2009 to 2011, where they had a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate and a 70-seat majority in the House. Where were these ideas then? Oh, that's right. The rules that exist were working for them. So when the people, under the rules that currently exist, no longer are in your favor, the idea is to change the rules to take the people out of the equation. And don't give me this nonsense. Well, let's have 5 appointed by one party, 5 by another, and then those 10 get together. Excuse me. Why should I have those who lost the election be able to select as many Supreme Court justices as those who won? What's the purpose of the election? Why have an election? They have consequences, as the prior resident of the White House famously said. Now, I want to go back to the comments they had from President Trump, because they were kind of taken out of context in that clip. There was a specific question that was asked by a reporter, and it wasn't about a constitutional amendment on the part of the GOP. It was about the desire of the Democrats to change the construction or the makeup of the Supreme Court.
But first, on the 2020 election, there's a growing number of Democratic candidates who have endorsed the idea of adding seats to the Supreme Court. Is that an idea that you would entertain in the remainder of your term or possible next term, or is that not something that you agree with?
No, I wouldn't entertain that. The only reason is that they're doing that is they want to try and catch up. So if they can't catch up through the ballot box by winning an election, they want to try doing it in a different way. Now, we would have no interest in that whatsoever. It'll never happen. It won't happen. I guarantee you, it won't happen for 6 years.
That was the context in which Donald Trump said this isn't going to happen. I know what the Democrats are up to. They've been getting their butts kicked at the polls, and this has been happening since 2008. Since the 2008 election, the landslide of votes and electoral victories have been with the Republican Party. In the 8 years of Obama, the Democrat Party lost more than 1,000 elected offices at all levels, federal, state, local. They lost governorships. They lost the majority of state legislatures. They lost the House. They lost the Senate. And then finally they lost the White House. That is why you're hearing all this stuff going on. Well, the Democrats, they won they had the blue wave in 2018. Election fraud and voter fraud is not a wave make. I'm sorry. Orange County, California, which voted for the Republican candidate for governor, but somehow mysteriously elected 6 Democrats to Congress to represent the most Republican part of at least Southern California. You believe that? I don't. I don't believe it. Well, they were better kids. No, they weren't. And the problem is people are not willing to fight for the integrity of the electoral process. There need not be any of this nonsense that you're going to see again in 2020. There's going to be more voter fraud. There's going to be more election fraud. All the people who are coming at the border and now are unaccounted for, they're going to show up at the polls voting Democrat. Mark my words. But Donald Trump is remaking the judiciary, the federal judiciary, to the point that law and order, American law and order, constitutional law and order, is going to become increasingly the watchword of the day. Once that occurs, progressives know that their oxygen is running out, because that means they have to convince an increasing number of people, because that's what federalism does. It puts power in the hands of the people, whereas progressivism concentrates it in the hands of a few that can be more easily manipulated. The death of American judicialism under Donald Trump is welcomed, and I just hope that we have more old liberal justices who are ready to pack it in so younger conservative justices can continue to get this nation back on the right path. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin' will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin' here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the trade talks are back in the news as Trump is squeezing China even more. The U.S. administration recently announced, very recently, within the past few days, that they were going to hit China with another large round of tariffs on their products. CBS News reported it this way on, I believe it was the 10th, Friday, the 10th of May.
American businesses and consumers will pay more for many Chinese imports after the U.S. increased tariffs on $200 billion worth of goods, and that happened overnight. There is now a 25% tariff on Chinese products worth a total of $250 billion. The Trump administration raised the tariffs in the middle of trade talks that continue today in Washington. Weijia Zhang is at the White House. Weijia, good morning.
Good morning, John. President Trump says the two biggest economies in the world were getting very close to reaching a deal, but then Beijing backpedaled on concessions and tried to change the language in the proposal. Just a couple minutes ago, he tweeted that the talks with China continue in a congenial manner and there is absolutely no need to rush. He also insists tariffs will bring in more money than any traditional agreement.
Well, he just wrote me a beautiful letter. I just received it, and I'll probably speak to him by phone.
President Trump had nice things to say about his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping, but his actions spoke much louder. At midnight, tariffs on $200 billion of Chinese goods more than doubled from 10 to 25%.
Taken Well over $100 billion a year. We never took in 10 cents from China, not 10 cents.
Just hours before the new taxes kicked in, a Chinese delegation met with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer at his office, along with Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin.
I'm for the USA. I'm for the USA.
All week, Mr. Trump dialed up the threats that he's walked back before at a rally in Florida.
By the way, you see the tariffs we're doing? Because they broke the deal. They broke the deal.
And on Twitter, where he complained the negotiations for a trade deal were moving too slowly. The president blames China for stealing technology and pressuring American companies to turn over trade secrets, allegations Beijing denies. If the two sides do not reach a trade agreement, Mr. Trump says he's prepared to put 25% tariffs on another $325 billion in Chinese imports, which would cover everything the country ships to the U.S. He says that may be a blessing for American manufacturers.
It'll be the old-fashioned way, the way we used to do it. We made our own product.
But in February, the trade partnership and economic consulting firm estimated these new tariffs, plus the ones already in place, will cost the average family of four $767 a year. Still, the president is confident his strategy has boosted the economy and is well received by his supporters. John.
Risha, thank you.
This is fascinating to me. The media is so anti-American. It's not anti-Trump. I keep telling you guys this. This isn't about how they think about Trump. This is about what they think of you. What they're saying is anti-American. For example, we're going to put tariffs on everything that China ships, and that's a bad thing. That's going to cost the average American family $700 a year. Well, that's only if they choose to continue to buy those products, is it not? Why are you acting as though the American family doesn't have any other choice than to buy what China ships over here? The fact that they have doesn't mean that they will, because the American consumer is very price sensitive. I hope you know that. Unless you have a decided marked quality difference between a Chinese product and a Korean product, or a German product, or a French product, or a Canadian product, or a Mexican product, or, dare I say it, an American-made product. Unless China is making things so much better than everybody else, you will get the American consumer to move quick, fast, and in a hurry away from a Chinese product that costs more. The assumption that they make is that no matter what a Chinese product costs, Americans will go out and get it. What country are they living in again? I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way for me or anyone else I know who lives in this country. Also, let me ask you a question. This thing has been going on for a while, correct? This whole thing about tariffs going back and forth with China, and all the harm it's going to be doing because there's more tariffs. Where's the inflation? Maybe you haven't been paying attention, but we keep getting jobs reports that show an increase year over year in wages of 3.2%, and that it outstrips inflation by at least 1%. If what was going on in the so-called trade war was so bad, where is the inflation? It's not there for a reason. Because nothing that's going on is really causing the massive increases in cost to the American consumer. And I repeat, the media is acting as if U.S. consumers and U.S. businesses have no other options than either Chinese products or Chinese markets or Chinese trade. They have no other options, including just buying American. Oh, and by the way, the nasty little secret that they just don't want to talk about is, since this whole trade war that they're talking about is going on, has been occurring, China's been cutting tariffs left and right. 11 months ago, they cut their tariffs on imported cars, everybody's imported cars, from 25% down to 15%. 6 months ago, they cut tariffs on a wide range of products, 1,500 products, including those that don't come to them from America, on everything from seafood to electronics, opening up their markets to the entire world. That's what this so-called trade war has done. It has made China back down off of tariffs and open up their markets, not only to the United States, but also to the whole world. So let me ask you this. Do you really understand what's going on? Or do you really believe, are you sure that the media is telling you what's going on? Because they keep talking trade war, how this is going to hurt. This is a terrible thing that's happening. Don't you understand how bad this trade war is? Yeah. Back in June of last year, a analyst was on CNBC setting the record straight, and the simple fact is, what he is saying in this clip I'm getting ready to play for you lines up more with the facts than the Chicken Little approach that you heard from CBS News and that you're getting from almost all of the American press, that the sky is falling, everything's falling apart. It's going to cost more to get a pack of beer, a six-pack of beer. It's going to cost more to buy a car. I don't know how many cars we buy from China in the first place, but all this doom and gloom because of this trade war. This gentleman on CNBC said it straight that it's not a trade war at all.
No. I think that what he is doing is negotiating very, very aggressively, knowing that the other side, China in particular, is unable to retaliate in a way that is going to hurt the U.S. economy. The U.S. economy is a very low exporting economy. It exports around less than 12% of its GDP. But on the other side, you have China, who has not only massive industrial overcapacity, but needs to export more. And more importantly, it cannot grow 6.5% without the massive trade surplus with the United States. So this is a negotiation tactic. And what you know is that time doesn't work in favor of one side, China, and what the U.S. is trying to do is to achieve something in return. And think about this. Every time that Trump presents a new set of tariffs, we find, oh surprise, a new set that existed already of tariffs that China is lifting. So, in fact, what we're actually seeing is the unveiling of so many hidden tariffs, so many hidden protectionist measures from the European Union, from China, that ultimately will end up in a different perspective.
But there are some very specific industries. I mean, General Motors sells more cars in China than it does in the United States domestically.
Sure.
And most of the US automakers manufacture and assemble with Chinese finished parts.
Absolutely.
So there will be significant consequences for some industries if Trump continues down this road.
Because there will be no trade war. This is not a trade war. This is a negotiation. This is a negotiation in which the US, as your biggest customer, is saying, look, this is unfair. So we need to find a common ground. Right.
Don't miss what this gentleman is saying. The U.S. doesn't need China as much as China needs the U.S. We're not the ones who have to ship our goods overseas. Less than 12% of our GDP is exported. That's not the case with China. They need that big surplus, that trade surplus, to fuel their growth. They fuel their economic growth by selling their products abroad. We don't. And as a result, we can do whatever we want because time does not work in favor of China. It works in favor of the United States, who doesn't need Chinese goods for their economy to move forward. Well, what about specific industries? And guess what? Do you really think that China... Let me help you out with this. China doing anything to retaliate is cutting off their own nose to spite their face. Are you serious? They're not going to do anything to General Motors in their country. They're not. All that would do would be to increase the price of cars in China. And how is that going to fuel economic growth if you're selling fewer cars of any maker in a country that needs those transactions to occur? Well, General Motors is going to be hurt. General Motors does not... Look, this is not the 1940s. What's good for General Motors is no longer what's good for the USA. That's not the way it works anymore. There was a time. This ain't it. We had to bail General Motors out. That's how far removed they are from running or leading the U.S. economy. They don't. If they can't figure out a way to run their business with a different trade climate with China, then bump them. Let them go bankrupt, which they should have done in 2008 and 9. Guys, understand this. When Donald Trump hits China, we find out that, okay, well, if you're going to do that, I'll tell you what we'll do. We're not going to tariff you back. We're going to get rid of some more tariffs. We're going to cut the tariffs on cars. We're going to cut the tariffs on products that other people can bring in from any other country in the world. And every time he hits them, we find out there's more stuff that the media has never told us about with respect to the trade relationship between the U.S. and China. Donald Trump knew about this. That's part of his campaign. He was saying, we have terrible negotiators. We have people who've allowed the U.S. to be bent over a chair by the Chinese for decades. We suck. And he said, I'm going to change that. And he has changed it. He has not only changed it for the United States. He has not only changed it for China. He has changed it for everyone else, including the United States, who does business with China. That sounds like a winning, I'm sorry, let me say it again, a winning proposition for everyone involved. As long as this negotiation continues, it's amazing. It's like turning something upside down and shaking, turning pants upside down and shaking them and just seeing what's going to fall out. Every time he shakes, something else falls out that should never have been there, that nobody was telling you about, and now you can see it. And China is going back and saying, oh, well, maybe we need to make this change. And we're not seeing any inflation here. And we still have a wide variety of options here, including the ability for some smart person in the United States to figure out how to make a product that's built in the United States that competes on a cost basis with whatever's coming in from China and steal that market share. And you think China's going to sit still for that, or are they going to remove their tariffs and cut their prices? So how do I lose if I'm a consumer? You need to wake up and recognize that the American press lies through their teeth to the American people, to the detriment of the American people, because that is the level of disdain that they have for Americans. They want you to be at the mercy of other countries who would be happy to continue to take advantage of us. And Donald Trump has said, we're not going to do that anymore. You should be happy. You got a booming economy. You got wage growth that outstrips inflation. You have Chinese tariffs coming down. Well, our tariffs are going up. So our inflation is not growing as much as our paychecks are growing. So for me, I say Trump needs to squeeze China even more. Squeeze her until she pops. And then maybe we can get back on the economic path from a more global standpoint of making America great again. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of this first hour. We have an Obomaton who was indicted, and this is not a very straightforward story. For those of you who are not aware of Joe Low, or Low Take Joe, however you want to pronounce his name, Joe Low, 1MDB, which is a Malaysian Economic Development Fund, and Pras Michel of the Fujis. This is an odd mix, but let's start with what 1MDB is, because that is where the scandal is, a multi-billion-dollar financial debacle.
The 1MDB scandal is one of the greatest financial frauds in history. $4.5 billion was allegedly misappropriated from the Malaysian State Investment Fund and used to buy luxury real estate, expensive works of art, and even to produce a Hollywood movie about, of all things, financial fraud. But how did they do it? According to the U.S. Department of Justice, one strategy involved setting up bank accounts under fake company names that resembled real firms. BlackRock Commodities Global Limited sounds a lot like the Global Investment Manager, while Affinity Equity International Partners Limited could easily be mistaken for the private equity firm. There's no law against this, but it could help put investigators off the scent. Another scheme saw money transferred to trust accounts at U.S. law firms. Client confidentiality rules in the U.S. mean these accounts are barely regulated, making suspicious transactions difficult to find. The DOJ alleges that firms like Shearman & Sterling and DLA Piper were unwittingly used to sneak $1 billion from 1MDB into the U.S. The third strategy allegedly employed is what the DOJ calls layering, moving funds from bank account to bank account, adding layers of complexity until the original source of the funds is camouflaged. Let's follow the money allegedly used to buy this pink diamond necklace for Rosmah Mansor, the wife of former Malaysian Prime Minister and founder of 1MDB, Najib Razak. It all starts with a $3 billion bond arranged by Goldman Sachs in 2013. That was issued by a wholly owned subsidiary of 1MDB, incorporated in the British Virgin Islands, and the proceeds were earmarked for a joint venture with a firm in Abu Dhabi. But instead of heading to the Middle East, most of the money was transferred into an account at Swiss private bank BSI in Lugano. From there, the DOJ claims it was shifted to investment funds in offshore centers. The money was wired via correspondent bank accounts at JP Morgan Chase in the US to two accounts at the Singapore branch of Swiss private bank Falcon Bank. Funds went back and forth between these accounts, adding layer upon layer of complication, gradually obscuring the origin. Eventually, $681 million were transferred from Tanor into a Malaysian bank account held by Najib Razak, a sum he insists was a political donation from the Saudi royal family. 5 months later, most of it was returned. The money bounced around accounts at Falcon and DBS Bank in Singapore before a sum of $27.3 million was, according to the DOJ, wired to jeweler Lorraine Schwartz to buy the necklace. The complexity of these cross-border flows has made getting to the bottom of the 1MDB fraud painstaking and difficult. But with Malaysia's government keen to burnish its graft-fighting credentials and claw back the money stolen, the investigation shows no signs of slowing down.
That was December of 2018, and I'm sure you're like I am. Okay, so what does that have to do with Pras Michel and what he was indicted for? I don't get that. Well, because think about it this way, how convoluted it was to get that $27.3 million for a necklace. Wow. Out of $681 billion, most of it was paid back, but some of it was funneled over into a bank account, and what wasn't given back was used to purchase a necklace. Okay, still, what does it have to do with an Obama devotee? Well, on May 10th, that investigation that the Financial Times report indicated would continue made it all the way to Pras Michel.
Former Fugees rapper Pras Michel is expected to be charged by federal prosecutors in the US today for taking part in an illicit lobbying effort which used funds siphoned from 1MDB. Citing sources, Bloomberg reports that Michel will be accused of donating funds to back the re-election of Barack Obama in 2012 without disclosing their foreign origin, specifically Low Tick Joe. It was previously reported that Low gifted $20 million or 83 million ringgit in 2012 to Michel. The rap star donated over $1.3 million or 5.4 million ringgit to Obama's campaign that same year. Those spokesmen told Bloomberg that the Penang-born businessman has never made any campaign contribution, directly or indirectly, in the US. Michelle is already fighting the US Justice Department over its effort to forfeit $38 million or 158 million ringgit, which it says is connected to the 1MDB fiasco. The civil forfeiture complaint alleges that he aided a scheme to try to get the DOJ to drop an investigation into embezzlement from the state fund. It said Michelle was engaged by Lowe's brother and that he helped by opening bank accounts in the US. Michelle has denied any wrongdoing.
Of course he did. So if you go back to the Financial Times report and you talk about all the layering where money was moved back and forth, somewhere in there, 20 million fell out to Pras Michel. And of that, apparently 1.3 million, he found a way to gift to the Obama campaign in 2012. Wow. According to TMZ, founding member of the Fugees, Pras Michel, is in serious trouble with the feds for allegedly funneling millions of dollars worth of campaign contributions. Federal prosecutors in D.C. slapped the rapper with a 4-count indictment claiming he and infamous Malaysian businessman Joe Low conspired to funnel funds from foreign accounts to make political contributions in the U.S. I thought we had a problem with foreign money or foreign influence in U.S. election campaigns. Isn't that what we just had Mueller go on for 22 months? How come he missed this? Fortunately, the rest of DOJ did not. Although the indictment doesn't mention Obama by name, it says Pras made the donations for a presidential candidate in the 2012 election and specifies dates on which Pras posed with pics with that candidate. According to multiple reports, the candidate was Obama. Pras has posted pics with Obama, although it's unclear the date they were taken. According to documents obtained by DMZ, Lowe would send the money to Pras, who would then recruit friends or straw donors and then divvy up the funds between them so they could make smaller donations to political action committees. The feds believe the smaller donations were made to disguise the source of the money, namely Joe Lowe, who's also been indicted. It is illegal for all foreign entities, not only Russia, to use money to influence U.S. elections. Well, they didn't touch Trump, but they found somebody involved with Barack Hussein Obama. Love it. Absolutely love it. For his part, TMZ also caught up with Pras Michel. I believe it was at LAX on Friday, the 10th of May, to ask him about the indictment, and here is what he had to say.
Can you help us make sense of these allegations against this Malaysian probe? What's going on there?
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused too. I know the guy obviously, but it's like they're writing a movie right now. Yeah. So it feels like a movie. This whole allegation and what they're supposed to be ongoing and all that.
So you're like somehow connected to this guy? Yeah. And then how are you going to clear your name in this? How are you?
I'm going to have lawyers, obviously.
Are they pretty confident that you'll be able to?
Oh, I'm very confident. Yeah, I mean, come on, bro. That's what it is.
What exactly are they accusing you of?
It's allegation of me trying to help some guy come here, bring money in here. It's weird.
Who's this guy? The guy that you connected to.
Oh, Joe. Yeah. Well, allegedly, I'm not even clear. I'm not even sure something about money taking a couple $1 billion. I'm not really even sure about the whole story. I mean, all this articles popping up in the last couple of years. I haven't really been paying attention to it. But obviously, a bunch of us know the guy because he's from the States. That's the extent of our relationship.
You think it was the fact you got caught up with the wrong person? Like this guy was?
No, I think it's the fact that I'm black.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 100%. No, we're not talking about him. Jolo, he's Asian.
He's Asian?
Yeah, like Chinese Malaysian.
So really, you think it's more of a racial?
Well, not with him. I'm talking about in particular with me.
You mean it?
Yeah.
That's everything.
Right. I think so. Just the vibe. But what's interesting, though, is that they'll come after someone like me, but won't go after someone who clearly murdered someone at some embassy. You know what I'm saying?
So for his part, Pras Michel is clueless. I don't know what happened. But obviously you got the money to pay a bunch of lawyers, and we know the indictment says that you were gifted $20 million, and only $1.3 million supposedly went to these campaign contributions, which were inappropriate. It's amazing. How did you come with all the... Well, the Fugees is famous. I understand that, but $20 million. Did you get $20 million from Joe Low or not? And for those who don't know, federal indictments almost invariably result in federal prison time. The feds don't indict you if they ain't got you. They got you if they brought the indictment. Now, are we going to do this the same way they did Jussie Smollett in Chicago? You have him dead to rights, but you don't want to prosecute him because he's black, because he's already put that out there. They're after me because I'm black. No, maybe they're after you because you laundered money and used it to influence a U.S. political campaign using foreign money. Many of us already knew that Barack Obama's campaign had a lot of foreign money in it, both in 2008 and in 2012. But now we have an indictment that shows the Department of Justice believes the same thing and that they can prove it. This is wonderful news. You spent 22 months in front of everybody's camera screaming Russian collusion, but in 2 election campaigns before that, you missed what was going on with a rapper, a Malaysian businessman, and billions of dollars in strange financing. I'm going to turn this over to my good friend Ron Edwards. But I just want you to think about this. We just indicted somebody for what you spent 22 months going after Donald Trump about. We just indicted somebody for doing that on behalf of Barack Obama. Hello. And after Ron Edwards, we'll be back with hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
Bob Mueller's politically motivated investigation regarding Trump concluded no evidence of collusion. So why are Democrats so angry that Attorney General Barr basically agreed with the Mueller report? Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook. So, Attorney General Barr concluded, as did Bob Mueller, that there was no evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Mother Russia. Yet, Mueller tried to embarrass Attorney General Barr via the Washington Post, claiming that Barr did not fully capture the context of Mueller's substance of the report. What we are witnessing is a concerted effort by Democrats, Mueller, and the Dragon media to muddy the waters and create a dirty cloud of doubt in the minds of American people about the Trump administration in order to help the obstructionist Democrats in the upcoming election season. The Democrats have done many dirty things since Trump took office. Particularly, 1, they tried to prevent Trump from successfully governing. 2, protect Hillary. 3, lie like dirty rugs on Trump and his family. I predict the Democrats will soon be Hamanized, meaning they will swing from the political ropes they designated for Trump. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me Fridays live at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific on AmericaMatters.us.
Ron Edwards, the new voice of America.
Sponsored by David E. Garrett Jewelers.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. This next topic is sensitive and sad, to be honest with you. And what we're talking about now is the child murderers resorting to violence. And on some levels, it's actually understandable. And what I mean by that, abortion is under tremendous pressure in America. Americans have made it very clear that they're not fans of abortion. They're not in favor of killing children in the womb. That is the majority position. That is the prevailing position in the United States. Abortion is not a popular thing. You'll find many saying that abortion is on the decrease. But what we are not hearing enough about is the comparison from a moral imperative perspective between abortion and chattel slavery. Chattel slavery was legal in the United States prior to 1863. Simply was. Was it legal everywhere? No. Some states had banned it, had made sure you weren't going to do it. You had the different compromises for states coming into the Union, which ones could enter as slave states and which ones were going to enter as free. You had the Civil War where you had 10 states that left the Union over the issue of being told what to do by the federal government, which was seeking to regulate them on the issue of slavery, and they were not going to have it. Why are you bringing up slavery? Slavery was legal, just as abortion is legal. Slavery was immoral. Chattel slavery was immoral. The trafficking in men that went on during chattel slavery, the treatment of human beings as something other than human beings, is immoral. No differently than killing a human innocent who has no hope of defending himself and cannot speak on behalf of what is being done to him. That is also immoral. Let me make it very clear. You cannot support abortion on demand in America and be a moral person. You cannot. It doesn't matter how many people agree with you. You cannot have that level of disregard for human life and that level of, well, disregard for human responsibility. That's what it takes to support abortion. You can't have those things and be a moral human being. I'm making it as clear as I can make it. It is not about a woman's right to do anything. Abortion is not about that. The right that a woman has regarding her body pertains to her body. Abortion is not about the woman's body. Abortion is about the body of someone else entirely. The very fact that the only person who is greatly harmed by abortion, I don't want to hear about, I was traumatized. You're not dead. I don't want to hear it. It's meaningless to me to basically compare someone's emotional upset to that of another person being dismembered without anesthesia, without anything, just being pulled apart, having their limbs pulled off of them while they are in the womb. I'm really not trying to hear about your emotional upset. I'm not. I don't care about it. No differently than I would want to hear about a reformed slave master, or maybe not a reformed slave master, saying how it was terrible for him to see his favorite servant getting beat with a whip. I mean, really? But at least the slave might live. The child almost never does. But I digress. Once you understand what this is, that it is a moral imperative. Abortion is immoral, like slavery was immoral. The moral imperative made people do things that were considered inappropriate at the time. John Brown at Harper's Ferry was not considered appropriate. And of course he was caught and he was killed for what he did. His was the more moral position and gave up his life to take a stand against chattel slavery in the United States. That's the right side of the argument, whether or not you agree with his tactics. And I'm not saying that I do, or that I do agree with what he did. But I have no issue with the motivation he had for doing it. And when people have galvanized themselves around the excuse of legality to continue in immorality, you don't have a lot of options in polite company. The only thing left to do, because once you commit an immoral act to being legal, then the only thing left to do, if you are going to stop it, is to wage open war. That's where we got to in the United States of America in 1861. All the political solutions went away. And they said, well, if we can just get the right person elected president, then that will address things, and etc. so on. No. It won't. It didn't. The reaction to Abraham Lincoln winning the election of 1860, and he did not win the popular vote, by the way, but there were more than two people running. He didn't snag the majority of the popular vote. The majority of the popular vote was not in favor of abolishing slavery. If you're measuring that by Abraham Lincoln being an anti-slavery presidential candidate, He didn't get the majority of the vote. Nevertheless, he won the Electoral College and he is president. But we ended up in a war a year later. Less than a year later. With abortion, you're looking at the same thing. And the people have turned to open warfare. They have identified abortion providers and abortion clinics as enemies and the territory of enemies, and they have attacked them. I'm not condoning any of that. I'm saying I understand. If you feel strongly that abortion is wrong, and they have legalized it, you have as many options to oppose it as John Brown did to oppose slavery. He didn't choose the Gandhi method that Dr. King chose to go about this without violence. He didn't choose that. But what he did was for the right, quote-unquote, reason, even if it was the wrong method. We hear a lot in the United States about the war on abortion, and it is a physical war. You'll hear about the Eric Rudolphs who bombed abortion clinics and then ran off into the Carolina woods and wasn't caught for 5 years. You're going to hear all about that. What you don't hear about is the violence that goes the other way. But most importantly, what you don't hear is the fact that the people of the United States are winning the war against abortion. I was looking at something from the Thomson Reuters Foundation, published back in 2016. When you look at everything that has gone on in the United States, including those who have been vigilante in their opposition to abortion, here's an interesting result. In 1982, there were 2,908 abortion providers in the United States. And we were already having people waging war on abortion and abortion providers by that time. 10 years later, in 1992, there were 2,380 abortion providers in the United States. A decrease of 528. In 2011, there were 1,720 abortion providers in the United States. And the number has continued to decrease, and now the laws are catching up to that, and many states are going after abortion, and aggressively so, to the point where what are known as heartbeat bills have been passed and enacted in several states, and those laws make it a crime to abort any child, to kill any child in utero once a heartbeat can be detected. If you can detect the heartbeat, it is illegal to kill the child in the womb. That's far from abortion on demand, because you're not giving people 20 weeks for that. You can detect fetal heartbeat, I think, as early as 6 weeks, maybe even earlier than that. Here's the thing you have to understand. When you take on moral issues and give those who are on the side of what is morally correct no legal option, they will respond with violence. We saw that with slavery. We saw that to a lesser degree with the civil rights movement, because what prevailed with the civil rights movement was non-violence. Same with Jim Crow. But when you put people in a moral struggle and tell them that what is moral is illegal, then there are many who will basically say, I would rather be a criminal than abide by an immoral law. There has been a war on abortion since it was declared, quote unquote, a woman's right. And though it is still on the books as a right, it is in practicality not as available as it once was. And its availability is decreasing to the point that those who favor abortion have also taken to violence to defend this fanciful thing they call a woman's right to abortion. Until Roe v. Wade is overturned and it becomes a 50-state battle, you're going to see these things happening across the nation. Once it becomes not a federal war, because that's what it is now, but a 50-state war, then you're going to have people getting off the fence. I'm not talking about the radical left that would basically kill any child at any time for any reason. I'm talking about the citizens who live in these states who, while they are sensitive to quote-unquote women's issues, they still find this to be an abhorrent practice. They're going to be on the hot seat of their own conscience, once Roe v. Wade is overturned. Remember, overturning that decision doesn't make abortion illegal. It makes it a state matter. And now the states can determine whether or not they want children to be killed in the womb within their borders. There will always be states that hate children enough and hate women enough, because if you think abortion is pro-woman, you're deluded. I don't know how it can be a positive thing to reach up inside a woman and snatch life out of her in the most violent way imaginative and say that you're doing something positive for the woman. That's crazy talk. But that is the discussion we keep having right now. We are at war, and the moral side of the argument is winning, even if the tactics are distasteful. Shooting people is distasteful. Bombing people and places is distasteful. But on this particular topic, many have already determined that the end will justify the means. And as I said, in 1982, there were more than 2,900 abortion providers in this country. And by 2011, 29 years later, you are looking at 1,720. That tells you what you need to know about the direction. The anti-abortion crowd needs to know you've been winning the war for some time. You haven't been winning the media narrative. Now you have a chance, because state governments are stepping up, to win the legal argument and have legality more closely aligned with morality on this issue. Make it happen. Make it happen. It's not about women. It's never been about women. It's about children. And it's about the next generation. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia, WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Going along or following on with the notion that abortion is a war, you have to see how those on the other side are fighting it. We know what's going on the pro-life side. We know that we've gone from very physical acts of violence, which unfortunately still continue, and they have migrated now to increasingly legislative approaches which are challenging the very ruling that pro-abortion advocates say gives them or gives women the right to kill their children in the womb without any accountability or without any restriction. That's what they believe. Well, as they see the nation turning against them, and let's remember something, we have to remember that the highest authority in the United States of America is not the courts. If you read the Constitution, the highest authority in the United States is the American people. If they don't want something, then laws have to change. If they don't want something that the law supports, then they need to see that it changes. I will always go back, when we're talking about abortion, I will go back to chattel slavery as a comparison. The American people did not want chattel slavery. The laws changed. They did not want chattel slavery. The violence escalated to the point where you had a war in which 600,000 men were killed to abolish slavery. If the American people do not want it, the courts will not be able to impose it upon them. And the American people have made it clear they do not want abortion. Just look at the numbers. Look at the declines in abortions that are occurring, the declines in the number of outlets available for abortion, the decline in the number of providers. Some of that is because they felt like they were hunted, and some of that is because they recognize that what they're doing is wrong and they gave it up on their own, or they recognize that public sentiment was against them and it just wasn't a good idea to continue the practice. Doesn't matter. On the side of what's going on now, here's something that was interesting. Back in April, a state Democrat lawmaker, elected official, had this thing. It's just strange to me why he would do this. Nevertheless, he live tweeted himself. I think he was he had a Facebook Live session or a tweet session where he filmed himself harassing people who were protesting abortion peacefully at a Planned Parenthood facility.
Representative Brian Sims here, and I'm once again out in front of Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania. Today's protester. Now, she is an old white lady who's going to try to avoid showing you her face. Shame on you. What you're doing here is disgusting. This is wrong. You have no business being out here. These are the kind of attacks that we can expect on Planned Parenthoods in the current administration. Shame on you, ma'am, for standing out here thinking you know what's right for other people's bodies. And don't convince yourself that what you're doing isn't extremely racist. How dare you? This is grotesque. This is the hiding, shameful face of those that judge at Planned Parenthood. And it's disgusting. bunch of pseudo-Christian protesters who've been out here shaming young girls for being here. And so here's the deal. I've got $100 to anybody who will identify any of these three.
So
I'm going to donate to Planned Parenthood. I'm going to donate to Planned Parenthood. So look, a bunch of white people standing out in front of a Planned Parenthood, shaming people. There's nothing Christian about what you're doing. Nothing Christian at all about what you're doing.
I asked my colleagues how it was that in a room of nearly 160 men, I was the man that respected women the most.
Yeah, that was Brian Sims, who's a state lawmaker in Pennsylvania, saying that he respects women the most when he's out there harassing people who are doing nothing more than praying in front of a Planned Parenthood center. Somehow that is terrible, that is disgusting, that is all these things. And at the end, he's in another place where obviously he's in the company of fellow progressives, where he's the guy who respects women. No, you have to understand, progressives only respect the women who agree with them. Everyone else is, as Hillary Clinton said, there's something wrong with you. You're controlled by men, and you don't have you're not capable of thinking for yourself unless you think like a progressive. That's what you have to deal with. That is one of the progressive male. This guy won an election in Pennsylvania. Something's going on in Pennsylvania. That's definitely the case. If that is what wins elections. On another note, back to the war that we were talking about and how it's being waged and won by the pro-life side. There is this occurrence that happened in Georgia over the past week.
This morning, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp is expected to sign one of the most restrictive and controversial anti-abortion laws in the country. The bill makes abortions illegal once a heartbeat is detected in the embryo. That can happen as early as 5 or 6 weeks after conception. Mark Strassman is in Atlanta with why the law could face a long legal challenge. Mark, good morning.
Good morning. This bill, also known as the Life Act, is yet another state's challenge to the legal milestone of Roe v. Wade, 1973 decision that made abortion legal in this country. And once the governor here signs this bill, lawsuits from opponents are guaranteed.
We as a state can recognize the life interest of these helpless children.
State Representative Ed Setzler is the main sponsor of the bill. That's thrusting Georgia into the middle of America's controversy over abortion rights.
I mean, the most defenseless person in our entire culture is the child in utero.
The fetal heartbeat law would take effect next year and still allow abortions if the baby's life or the mother's was in danger, or in cases of rape or incest.
But our current governor, who claimed to want to move Georgia forward, is pushing this cruel, punitive, and regressive bill.
Abortion rights advocates like State Senator Jen Jordan say many women don't even know they're pregnant by 6 weeks.
Clear intent of this is to make sure that women have absolutely no access to being able to get an abortion.
Georgia will be the 6th state to enact legislation banning abortions after 6 weeks. Iowa and North Dakota laws were struck down at the state and federal levels. Similar bills enacted this year in Kentucky, Ohio, and Mississippi are all facing legal fights.
I'm very frightened of the implications.
Makeup artist Jennifer Bennett works in Georgia's massive TV and movie industry. The Walking Dead, Black Panther, and the Hunger Games series were all filmed here. But more than 100 Hollywood stars promised to boycott the state if the bill becomes law.
Women who rely on this to pay their mortgages, to support their families, to put food on the table, what am I supposed to do?
Georgia's governor says he expects lawsuits and is ready to fight for this bill. All of this has become a multi-state legal challenge and seems headed for the U.S. Supreme Court. Nora?
All right, Mark, thank you.
In case you did not know, the states that are passing these laws, as you heard, 6 of them now, they want this to go to the Supreme Court. They are writing the laws that are being challenged specifically so that they can be tested and found constitutional once they are appealed to the Supreme Court. For those who did not know that, I listened to the young woman who is a makeup artist in the entertainment industry in Georgia, lamenting the fact that, oh my gosh, you guys are going to put me out of. Well, no one said you had to stay in Georgia. What are you supposed to do? Well, if you don't want little children to be protected in the womb where you live, then move to a state in which they won't be protected. There's still plenty of them. Only 6 states have passed these laws. It leaves you 44 options. Move to California if you're in the makeup artist industry for film and television. There's plenty of work here. There's plenty of work elsewhere. What you fail to recognize is these are the same arguments you had against getting rid of slavery. Well, what are we going to do without these Negroes? What am I supposed to do? Maybe you should do the work yourself. Maybe you should pay people to do the work. And allow them to fend for themselves. Pay them a wage whereby they go out and buy their own food instead of getting whatever you choose to give them and having whatever clothes you choose to provide for them. Let them do that themselves. When you have a moral imperative involving people and whether or not they are going to exercise authority in their own lives, then you just have to suck it up. And I know what you're going to say. Well, women have the authority to prevent pregnancy without anyone dying. They can close their legs. Or they can use any of a number of effective contraceptives, which means they can have as much sex as they want and not get pregnant. Abstinence, of course, is 100% effective. But, of course, we're not really trying to feel that one, are we? Oh, wait a minute. Unless you are Alyssa Milano, who was so bothered by Georgia passing a law that restricted abortion after a heartbeat was found or could be detected, well, she came up with this.
Alyssa Milano is calling on all women to join her in a so-called sex strike. The actress is protesting strict abortion bans passed by Republican-controlled state legislatures. She urged women to stop having sex until she says women get bodily autonomy back. Her call to action comes just days after Georgia became the 4th state this year to ban abortions once a fetal heartbeat is detected. The so-called sex boycott has created a storm on Twitter. One opponent to the idea suggests it makes it seem like sex is something women do as a favor to men, and we should note the law is not in effect just yet.
No, the law doesn't go into effect until January of 2020. A sex strike. You won't let us kill babies in the womb, therefore we are going to go on strike until we have physical autonomy of our own bodies? So, what are you trying to say, that every woman who has sex is being raped and is having sex against her will? What are you saying? And that unless you can kill a child in the womb, that means you don't have autonomy. Well, what about the autonomy of preventing pregnancy to begin with, and then no one has to die? What about the idea that women have a responsibility to manage their bodies so that no one else has to die because of choices that they make? I mean, I guess I'm just thinking outside the box here. I don't know. But a sex strike. If we can't kill, not to mention organizing a bunch of Hollywood types to boycott Georgia over the law. Wasn't that Hollywood who tried to get the electors in the Electoral College to not cast their vote for Trump? How'd that work out, by the way? If I remember correctly, Hillary lost a couple of electoral votes, and Donald Trump may have lost a vote or two, but at the same, when all was said and done, didn't amount to a hill of beans. Just didn't. Aren't these the same ones who tried to tell you how to vote? That didn't work either. So I wonder how their boycott would turn out if they actually went with it. So let me just see where I am now. The country is against abortion. They're demonstrating that they are anti-abortion. However, Democrats and progressives, they're not accepting of that. They are harassing people who are protesting against abortion peacefully, and when the will of the people is exercised in a state, you have the strange notion that, well, women, all women, y'all line up on me, and we are going to have a sex strike. Really? Alyssa Milano's a married woman. I wonder how her husband feels about that. I'm just curious. I'm just, kind of throwing something out there. This is what I think of Alyssa Milano's sex strike. Let her have it. Because there are more women who are willing to have sex with men who aren't interested in abortion than there are men who are going to miss the women who would withhold sex so they can have abortions. And if Miss Milano, or whatever her name is, not her married name obviously, if she is really ready to go through this, then she's ready to have her husband be with another woman, and she's fine with that. Must be, because this is her strike, not his. There's a war going on, and the folks on the left are becoming a little bit on the unhinged side. Harassing people, withholding sex, all this about killing a child in the womb. Something's wrong with these folks. But keep the pressure on them. And let's see what they have inside. Stanley, Levy, Black Man Thinkin' will be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. The question that always comes to my mind, and I think I've worked through some answers even in this broadcast that were better than I had hoped, was, do Americans care about America? And the reason you come to ask that question, if you're someone like me, is you see the things that are going on that are blatantly not in the nation's interest, and you wonder, well, where is the outrage? Where is the pushback? And the truth of the matter is there's more pushback than even I had been willing to acknowledge, because I'm always trying to encourage people to take up for the country and not allow what it is about America that is good, that is special, that is worth defending, be described or its narrative be the province of those who are progressives, because progressives do not care about America. They hate America, and they actually hate real Americans, in my opinion. But you have to wonder sometimes, well, since the narrative is so heavily influenced by a media that is very left-leaning and does not care about the American people, and that the Democrat Party is the epitome of those who do not care about the American people, you begin to, and they keep winding up in office, even when it's by hook or by crook, they still end up in office. You got to wonder, well, what do the American people care about? Have they given in to self-interest the way the identity politics of the left would have you go, that they've reduced people to one issue or a couple of issues or total self-interest, so that as long as their bread is getting buttered, they really don't care whose ox is getting gored. They don't care. Have they done that? You could make the argument that it seems that way based on the way the American people seem to respond to things. But 2016, that election was a huge indication that, well, may not be quite as far gone as you thought, may not be quite as hopeless as you thought, because it was not expected that Donald Trump could win. Not alone saying that he should win, but not even that he could win. But he did. And that was with the media dismissing him and calling the election over, or trying to convince people the election was over before they could even cast a vote. Watching the reaction of so many who were convinced that Hillary Rodham Clinton had it in the bag, only to find out she didn't even have a bag, was refreshing. It was encouraging. And what has happened in the interim has validated the choice of not going any further down progressive road. You did a good job. And then you start looking at other things. Well, what about the economy? When you allow the American people to run the economy, which is what happens when you deregulate, which is what happens when you lower tax rates, we've seen the best American economy in more than a decade. Period. Unemployment at historic lows, essentially been at full employment for, I don't know, a year or so now. We've had periods where there were more job openings than there were unemployed Americans looking for work. That is remarkable. That is astounding. And that is an indication that Americans care. Because the government does not control the economy. The American people control the economy. The government can regulate it to the point where it's not very productive. But when those controls from the government come off and the people respond by knocking unemployment down, by generating so much economic activity that you have so many job openings and that wages are now going up faster than inflation, this is an indication that the American people care. It's a good thing to know. For me, anyway, it's a very good thing to know. And then you come to some other weightier issues, like the one we've spent talking about most of this segment, which is abortion. And I go back to that statistic that I saw with 1982, 1992, and 2011, the stark drop in the number of abortion providers. If Americans did not care about America, that would not have happened. Because it wasn't just people taking physical action, violent action against abortion providers and abortion clinics that brought that number down. It was more so than anything else that the American people do not agree, and therefore they are using the politics, if you will, of moral suasion and presence to remove things that are not acceptable from their presence. That's why you have some states that only have one legal abortion provider in the entire state. Americans do care. The silent majority of Richard Nixon has morphed beyond the brigade that elected George W. Bush. That's gone past the revolution that swept Ronald Reagan into power and has now landed on the Trump train. It's the same group of people from an ideological perspective. We just want what's best for our country. And to the extent it can be embodied by the White House resident, then we'll take him. But that is far from saying that the battle is won. The battle is joined, and there are definite areas where the American people are enjoying an advantage over their detractors, particularly in the Democrat Party. But the Democrat Party is still notching interesting victories, as it were. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is an eyesore ideologically. She is ridiculous. She is not to be taken seriously. I don't even know if it was fair to call her a woman. The way she speaks, I'm not sure that puberty has been completed. Then you have Ms. Omar of Minnesota, who is blatantly anti-Semitic. And the Democrat Party cannot seem to get themselves to believing that she should actually suffer censure, that she should actually be held accountable for the things that she says that are anti-Israel. They just can't make it there. That is fascinating. And this is the same Democrat Party that, after 22 months of a waste of time investigation, that comes back and tells them what the object of that investigation had been telling them for 22 months. They are still trying to find a way to get blood out of a turnip. He's got to be guilty of something because we don't like him. And just because Robert Mueller couldn't find it doesn't mean it's not there. So we will continue to investigate. We all know what this is about. I can't stop investigating. I can't stop trying to find someone to go after Trump, because if I stop doing that, I have to acknowledge that mine is a failed message. I have to acknowledge that not only the Trump laws, but the 8 years of elections and special elections that came before that, that validated or made it very clear that the American people have gone off of me. They don't want me. If you're the Democrat Party, you're not wanted. Not by the electorate. Don't get me wrong, there is a far left in this country, always has been. And now with the current makeup of the Democrat Party, they seem to be more to the forefront. That's their prerogative. It's their party. But now we are seeing the concern, and it's breaking out in ways that are extraordinary. For the American people, to, after 8 years of being told what the new normal with regard to economic performance was supposed to be, for them to break out and push back up toward what is normal American growth is remarkable. They didn't accept the brainwashing. For them to elect a Donald Trump who has no political experience, no elected official experience, no government experience whatsoever prior to this race. Remarkable. And shows a concern for country that made it possible to depart from conventional politics. I am very happy about that. But we have a lot to go. And that's our show. Continue the fight. And always remember what you're fighting for. It is your individual liberty. It is the liberty of your friends and your family members to live their lives as they so choose, and not in accordance with the dictates of a government that doesn't recognize their place, or others who do not recognize their liberty. If the Lord says the same, I will be happy to join you again next week, continuing my effort to support America being great indefinitely. Do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.